It's the middle of the night. In a glass tower in Lower Manhattan, a 158-year-old institution is dying. The lawyers are still in the building. The phones haven't stopped ringing. Someone types the final number. $613 billion in debt, the largest bankruptcy filing in American history.
On September 15, 2008, Lehman Brothers, the fourth largest investment bank in the world, declared bankruptcy. It was the largest bankruptcy in history.
And by the time it was over, the ordinary people who had nothing to do with any of this would be the ones who paid the bill. $22 trillion in lost output. 8.7 million jobs. Millions of homes. But here's what almost nobody talks about. It didn't have to happen. There was a phone call that never got made. A guarantee the government chose not to give. A deal that was 48 hours away from closing. What if Lehman Brothers never fell? Lehman Brothers wasn't just a bank. It was a machine. 158 years old. $639 billion in assets. Bigger than the GDP of most countries. By 2008, they were making one enormous bet on the American housing market. Banks were handing out subprime mortgages to people who shouldn't have qualified. Lehman was packaging them into products called mortgage-backed securities and selling them to investors worldwide. The whole system ran on a single assumption. Housing prices would always go up. They didn't. Lehman's leverage ratio at its peak was 30-1. For every dollar they owned, they were borrowing 30 to invest. A 3% drop in asset value would wipe out their entire equity. Completely. And they were hiding it. An accounting trick called Repo 105. Before every quarterly report, Lehman temporarily moved up to $50 billion off their balance sheet, making the books look clean. Then quietly brought the debt back after the report was published. Think of it like this. You owe $50,000 on credit cards. Before your bank reviews your finances, you park that debt with a friend. Your statement looks clean. You get approved. Then you bring it back. Except the number wasn't $50,000. It was $50 billion. Every quarter. Investors thought they were dealing with a stable, healthy company. They were one bad quarter away from total collapse. September 12, 2008. 2 days before the filing. Hank Paulson, Treasury Secretary. Timothy Geithner, head of the New York Fed. Every major Wall Street institution in one room. They all know what's at stake. Lehman needs a buyer. Now. Bank of America walked away and bought Merrill Lynch instead. That left Barclays. And Barclays genuinely wanted Lehman. But British regulators refused to approve the deal without a shareholder vote, which would take weeks. Lehman had hours. And the US government refused to guarantee Lehman's trading obligations to make the deal work. 6 months earlier, they had done exactly that to save Bear Stearns. This time, they said no. September 15th, 1:45 a.m. Lehman files. Lehman didn't collapse because no one wanted to save it. It collapsed because no one could agree on how. Within hours, the Reserve Primary Fund announced its shares had fallen to 97 cents because of Lehman exposure, 3 cents below the dollar. The fund that was never supposed to lose money had lost money. Investors pulled $144 billion from money market funds in 2 days. Banks stopped lending to each other. The 3-month LIBOR rate spiked from 2.8% to 4.8% in 3 weeks. Companies couldn't access cash for payroll, for inventory, for basic operations. The world didn't run out of money. It ran out of trust. 18 months later, 8.7 million jobs lost. Unemployment from 4.7 to 10%. The S&P 500 down 57%. 3.8 million foreclosures in 2010 alone. The US committed over $700 billion through TARP. Global GDP contracted for the first time since World War II. A school teacher in Ohio losing her home. A small business owner in Texas who couldn't make payroll. A 22-year-old who couldn't find work for 3 years. Real people, real consequences, from one weekend of failed negotiations. Imagine it's Sunday night, September 14th, 2008. The phone rings. We're doing the deal. Barclays is in. We're guaranteeing it. What happens next? The government does what it did with Bear Stearns, guarantees just enough of Lehman's obligations. Barclays takes the trading desks, the brand. The toxic assets get wound down slowly, not dumped on the market at once. The money market funds never break. Credit stays tight but functional. We still get a recession. The housing bubble was deflating regardless, but economists like Lawrence Summers argued it would look more like 1990 to 1991. GDP fell 1.4% in that cycle, compared to 4.3% in the actual 2008 to 2009 contraction. Instead of 8.7 million jobs lost, probably 2 to 3 million. Same icy road, but you don't total the car. The crisis wasn't just bad because Lehman failed. It was catastrophic because of what it communicated. That no one is safe. That any institution, no matter how large, can vanish overnight.
Was bankrupt that quick and the whole thing ends that quickly? That's a little hard. That's a little surprising.
World trade fell 12.2% in 2009, the largest drop since World War II. Ships sat in ports, supply chains froze. Without the Lehman shockwave, that figure is probably closer to 3 or 4%. The world slows. It doesn't fall off a cliff. After 2008, governments rewrote the rules. The 6 largest U.S. banks held Tier 1 capital ratios of 8 to 9% before the crisis. By 2015, that figure had climbed to 12 to 14%. Banks doubled their cushion. None of that happens without Lehman. The political will to redesign the system doesn't exist without the scale of the destruction. But without those guardrails, are the same risky behaviors quietly rebuilding? The same 30-to-1 leverage, the same opacity. And instead of a crisis in 2008, do we get a much larger one in 2015 or 2020?
Generally across these markets. Let's talk about the speed with which we are watching this market deteriorate. We're red everywhere, essentially, down by 4-5%. We're down over 6.
Sometimes a controlled burn now prevents a catastrophic inferno later. The bailouts created a specific image. Banks got rescued. Homeowners got foreclosed. The same government that said it couldn't help ordinary people committed $700 billion to stabilize the institutions that caused the problem. 3.8 million foreclosures, while the men who packaged the risk walked away with their bonuses. The Tea Party, Occupy Wall Street, Brexit. The populist wave of the 2000s carries 2008's fingerprints. Without Lehman, the fury is smaller. The contrast isn't as stark. The political landscape of 2016 looks very different. We are still living inside that shockwave today. Even accepting all of that, there's a legitimate argument on the other side. Moral hazard. If the government saves Lehman, the message to every other bank is simple. Take whatever risk you want. Someone will catch you. Bear Stearns was saved in March 2008. Some economists argue that rescue contributed to Lehman's continued risk-taking because Lehman's executives assumed they would get the same treatment. Saving Lehman might have prevented one crisis. The question is whether it just delayed a much larger one. Lehman Brothers didn't have to fail. There were multiple moments where a different decision leads to a different world. The crisis was not inevitable. It was the result of specific choices made by specific people in a specific room over one very long weekend. $22 trillion in lost output, millions of jobs, millions of homes, a decade of slower growth. But here's the paradox. Maybe the world needed to see a $639 billion institution collapse to finally take seriously the risks that had been building for years. Or maybe there was a smarter way through. One that didn't require ordinary people to pay for decisions made in a room they were never invited into. Lehman Brothers was a test. A test of whether the people running the global financial system understood the risks they were carrying. They failed the test. And we paid the bill. The same leverage, the same opacity, the same too big to fail logic. It didn't disappear after 2008, it got regulated. But the underlying assumption that enormous institutions can take enormous risks because someone will absorb the consequences, that's still there. If one weekend, one phone call, one signature could have changed all of this, what else right now is one decision away from falling apart? Let me know below, and if this is the kind of deep dive you're here for, subscribe. There are a lot more dominoes left to trace.